Seltzer Kings.
Podcasts.
On WhatsApp, no one can see or hear your personal messages. Whether it's a voice call, message, or sending a password. To WhatsApp, it's all just this. So whether you're sharing the streaming password in the family chat or trading those late-night voice messages that could basically become a podcast, your personal messages stay between you, your friends, and your family. No one else. Not even us. WhatsApp. Message privately with everyone.
At Strayer University, we help students like you go from, is it possible, to anything is possible by offering access to up to 10 no-cost gen ed courses, so you can reach your goals affordably and fast. Visit strayer.edu to learn more. No-cost gen eds provided by Strayer University affiliate Sophia. Eligibility rules apply. Connect with us for details. Strayer University is certified to operate in Virginia by Chev and has many campuses, including at 2121 15th Street North in Arlington, Virginia.
Yeah, Gavin, we may have done it, but it was your guys' idea. This is not all our fault.
Ass. The following podcast contains...
But swearing and using dirty words is not one of my vices. I don't use foul language, and I don't like to hear anyone else use it either.
Explicit language.
Hello and welcome to the podcast that asks a simple question. When you overthrew their country for oil and figured they'd just be cool with it, what the hell were you thinking? I'm your host, Dave Bledsoe, and this is episode number 499.5. Was It Something We Said edition of the show, where we talk about the Iran hostage crisis. We're kicking off with Summer Series of 2025, so stay tuned. The What the Hell You Thinking podcast is brought to you by a special relationship, because that's what mates are for. Since before World War II, the United States and United Kingdom have been besties, through thick and thin, always having each other's back. Having a special relationship means that one goes, there goes the other. Be either they're going to fight the forces of fascism in Europe or forming coups in nations that carry grudges for a long time. The special relationship means, good idea or bad, we've got our best mates back. From the Falklands to Iraq, even in Grenada, where technically you guys invaded a UK territory, we're there for each other. That's what the special relationship is all about.
This is NBC Nightly News with Jessica Savage and Dick Schaap with sports.
Good evening. The American embassy in Tehran is in the hands of Muslim students tonight. Spurred on by an anti-American speech by the Ayatollah Khomeini, they stormed the embassy, fought the Marine Guards for 3 hours, overpowered them, and took dozens of American hostages. The students want the deposed Shah returned to Iran for trial. We have two reports, beginning with Steve Mallory.
United States Marine Corps guards used tear gas to try to disperse the mob of Islamic students. But that wasn't enough. Hundreds of Iranians finally overran the embassy compound, seizing about 90 people, mostly Americans. The hostages, men and women, were blindfolded and herded into the embassy's basement. No casualties were reported. The Iranians burned a United States flag and denounced the U.S. government, saying they would stay until the U.S. sends the deposed Shah back to Iran.
Me? I never been one to hold a grudge.
Another one of your nonsensical rambling stories.
If someone does something that offends me or hurts me, I let it go pretty quickly. Now, maybe I might stew on it a little longer than I should, like when my friend started fucking this girl I really wanted to fuck. I mean, I thought it was love, but really, I just wanted to have sex with her, and she knew it, and the problem was, she didn't want to fuck me, and instead of being an adult about it, she fucked my best friend.
Rude.
So after a few weeks, I sort of sucker punched my friend in the gut. Not hard, because I love the guy, and once I did that and the crying stopped, I was the one crying, not him.
You're a pussy.
No, I'm not a fighter. And once all that was over, I forgave my friend for fucking the girl that I wanted to fuck, and he forgave me for hitting him, and honestly, my friend did not do anything wrong in fucking the girl I wanted to fuck. I didn't own her. She could fuck whomever she pleased. But I wouldn't call that holding a grudge. That's just being in your 20s and stupid. Now take my last commander in the Air Force. I hated that fucking guy. I mean, I seriously considered shooting him one time. I could have. I was right there, him screaming at me. I was wearing a loaded pistol on my hip, and honestly, I debated.
I should bust a cap in your ass.
But going to jail for the rest of my life or getting the death penalty for fragging my commander didn't really seem like a great idea. So I let go of my grudge. I put it aside. Until a year or so later when I was out of the military and I saw his car parked outside a local movie theater, and I keyed that motherfucker up one side and down the other. I carved the word prick in big letters on his hood. And because it's important to let things go, not to let it fester in your soul, and once I did that, I was free of the rage. I mean, that and gouge suck my balls major into his hood, that helped, and I'll admit that flattening all four of his tires and pissing on his door handles might have been slightly extreme, but I didn't shoot the fucker. And I really could have shot the fucker. And so the best part about taking a shit on his driver's side door is he had long forgotten about Senior Dave Bledsoe and how he'd ruined taking his sergeant stripe from him because he didn't think old Dave looked professional, and how he kept moving me to the top of the deployment list for all the shitty deployments but never let me go on the good ones. And he's honestly lucky I'm a sort of person that doesn't hold grudges. Otherwise, I might have stuffed a rag in his gas tank in the car and, and set it on fire. Dave! But I don't hold grudges. Unlike, say, I don't know, the nation of Iran, who knows how to hold a fucking grudge, because those motherfuckers, they never let anything go. Which brings me to this week's topic and the kickoff for Summer Series 2025. That time the Iranians got really mad and took over our embassy and held everyone for 444 days.
For more than a year.
It was a national embarrassment and doomed any chance Jimmy Carter had been reelected, and it made a lot of Americans think we'd gone soft. But first, we should talk about the history of Iran.
You just can't help yourself.
Look, we got a format. 100,000 years ago, Neanderthals had settled the area that is now known as Iran. Modern humans moved into the area as early as 50,000 years ago, and agricultural settlements appeared in the archaeological record in the area around 11,000 years ago. Part of the Fertile Crescent, it was home to several civilizations over the millennia and was controlled by early empires like the Sumerians and the Assyrians.
Is this going to be on the test?
Yes, so take good notes, and there'll be a 5-page paper assigned at the end of the summer series. In the late 7th century BCE, the Proto-Persian Empire began to take shape, and by the early 6th century BCE, Darius was on the throne of what was then now called the Persian Empire. It had a much bigger name, but we're just going to stick with the Persian Empire. Now, you might remember the Persian Empire.
Come, Leonidas. Let us reason together.
But sadly, the movie 300 is about as far as most Americans go with their knowledge of the Persian, properly called the Achaemenid. See, I told you it was too big, empire. Which is really sad because it was the largest empire in the world at the time, a center of culture, learning, religion, and art. It built roads, canals. It had a postal service. In the 6th century BCE, you could order from Sharper Image and get it delivered to Babylon from Jerusalem. And then, did they conquer a bunch of smaller kingdoms? Sure, but everyone was doing that. But the Persians were not the brutal monsters they are portrayed in the movies as magical, mythical monsters from the East. That's just Greek propaganda. And the Persians ruled much of the known world from about 550 BCE till about 330 BCE when this young punk named Alexander came in and fucked up their shit. After Alexander the Great, Persia passed through a series of Greek kings, still hugely influential on the Roman and later Byzantine world. And in 633, the foundation of modern Iran was formed when the Arabs came calling, asking if the folks there might have heard about this dude named Allah and his prophet, Muhammad.
Praise Allah!
And the folks in Persia liked what they heard. Persia would be a center of Islamic religion and culture and science for hundreds of years, while Europe was still reeling from the collapse of the Western Roman Empire. Persia was experiencing the Islamic Golden Age, and then, well, the Mongols came.
That's all I have to say about that.
A string of empires rose and fell, some based in Persia, some holding Persia. The Europeans came calling and put some colonizer vibes on the country, though it was never formally colonized. It was an important place, but it wasn't until 1908 that the modern future of Iran was written, and that is when they discovered
oil, that is, black gold, Texas tea.
Over the course of 2 world wars, the various powers kept troops in Iran, with the UK being the largest and most powerful. In 1935, the ruler of Iran, Reza Shah Pahlavi, was formally named the nation Iran. After World War II, Mohammad Reza Shah became the ruler of Iran, the Shah, and as the first as a constitutional monarch, and then later as a dictator. And that is where our episode actually begins, because everything that happens at this point going forward is because Mohammad Reza Shah came along with a little help from his friends and decided that the needs of the few outweighed the needs of the many. So long as those few people are running a massive oil conglomerate and they were the government of the United Kingdom and the United States, who got together and did a little,
Capitalism!
It all began with an author, lawyer, and politician by the name of Mohammad Mossadegh. He became the prime minister of Iran in 1951. Mossadegh was a part of a movement throughout much of the formerly colonized and or occupied nations post-World War II, who looked to redress some of the wrongs done by centuries of foreign domination. He did this, according to a 2004 article in the Asia Times, quote, "During Mossadegh's time, Iranian peasants were freed from forced labor in their landlords' estates. Factory owners were ordered to pay benefits to sick and injured workers, and unemployment compensation was established. The giant caused 20% of the money landlords received in rent to be placed in a fund to pay for the development projects such as pest control, rural housing, and public baths. The giant supported women's rights and defended religious freedom and allowed courts and universities to function freely. In addition, the Colossus was known even by his enemies as scrupulously honest, impervious to corruption that pervaded Iranian politics," unquote.
What a monster.
Why a monster? Well, because, honestly, anyone who would even suggest such madness like this was clearly either a communist or, at the very least, a young Democratic Socialist Assemblyman running to be the mayor of New York City. But these simple moves to alleviate just some of the injustices endemic in Iranian politics was not the big problem. The big problem was that Mohammad Mossadegh had the audacity to think that maybe, just maybe, the nation of Iran ought to be in control of the oil that was being pumped from the very soil of the nation of Iran.
Outrageous!
Oil that was currently being pumped and sold by the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, a company that has changed its name, and you might know it better by its modern name.
Is it possible to drive a car and still have a clean environment? To refine a cleaner petrol? Can solar power become mainstream? Could business go further and be a force for good? Can 100,000 people in 100 countries come together to build a new brand of progress for the world? We think so. And now, BP, Amoco, Arco and Castrol have come together to try. Beyond petroleum. BP.
Mossadegh booted BP out of the Iranian oil business, and England decided that they wanted to boot Mossadegh out of power. But they could not do it alone. They needed the help of their bestest buddies, so they called on their special relationship with the United States of America. British intelligence, MI6, along with the CIA, cooked up a scheme to topple Mossadegh. More from the Asian Times, quote, "And so, one day in 1953, when the U.S. still enjoyed the affections of the Iranian people, the U.S. government decided that Mossadegh should not rule for long. And it schemed and schemed and schemed. Codenamed Operation Ajax and designed and hatched by none other than Kermit Roosevelt, a key CIA official operative and the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt, the U.S. orchestrated coup, toppled Mossadegh, and forever reshaped the history of Iran, the Middle East, and the world. The coup restored Mohammad Reza Shah to the peacock throne, allowing the monarch to impose a murderous 25-year tyranny that claimed the lives of thousands of Iranians," unquote. There's little need for me to go into the wherefores and the whys of the coup. Suffice it to say, it was about capitalism and communism, and even though Mossadegh was not remotely a communist, the Shah was a willing conspirator in the coup, willing in that he was given a shitload of money up front because he wasn't at all sure it would work, more money later to keep him sweet and all the guns, tanks, planes, and bombs he could ever want to keep his population from getting all uppity about him being in charge. He did what dictators do, forming secret police, kidnapping, torturing, and killing dissidents. His cronies ran all the businesses, kept all the money, and made sure the population towed the line with a mixture of coercion, terror, and the right kind of religion, meaning all the clerics in Iran were preaching the Shah's version of Islam, and any of them who didn't either went into exile, prison, or,
a lot of holes in the desert.
And one of those who chose exile was a fundamentalist cleric who went by the name of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, a name which most of America are at least passing familiar with. The Ayatollah Khomeini had one simple idea. He was going to make Iran great again. He was going to turn back time. Not just before the atrocity of the Shah, but all the way back to around the 7th century CE, Islam. From the Atlantic, quote, Iran's new rulers created a system far more intrusive than clerics of previous centuries could ever imagine. If one could sum up the original intent of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini's revolution, it was, quite simply, to preserve Islam. In his most influential treatise, Islamic Government, published in 1970, Khomeini wrote, "The preservation of Islam is even more important than prayer." An odd, if maddeningly vague claim. In practice, however, this meant something quite specific. For Khomeini, Islam could be preserved only through Islamic government, and this in turn was possible only if jurists, that is clerics, specialized in Islamic jurisprudence, led the government as guardians of Islam, unquote. In 1979, Khomeini got his chance. The Shah's government was teetering. He was old, sick, and clearly had no clearly defined successor. Massive protests were filling the streets daily, and Khomeini was the voice and choice of the people to take power. The United States desperately looked for some acceptable coalition of clerics and Iranian politicians to take power, but the Iranian people were not interested in that. They wanted Khomeini, and in January of 1979, the Shah fled Iran. In February of 1979, the Ayatollah returned from exile in France, and before Valentine's Day, he was the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran.
This is where it gets interesting.
The Shah had settled into a comfortable exile, first in Egypt and then in Morocco, the kind of comfort that comes with looting your nation's treasuries for many decades. But he was not a healthy man. He had the cancer. Despite being offered treatment in Switzerland, which had the benefit of being politically neutral and having as good or better medicine than anywhere in the world, the Shah wanted to be treated in the United States. Problem was, the Shah, being in the United States, would go off like a nuclear potato in the microwave of the Iranian people. People who already blamed the United States for decades of autocratic rule by the Shah, which was fair, since we were entirely to blame. Jimmy Carter had no desire to let the Shah into the United States, and as we learned from Wikipedia, he was pushed into it. Quote, President Carter did not wish to admit Mohammad Reza to the United States, but came under pressure from Henry Kissinger, who phoned Carter to say he would not endorse the SALT II treaty that Carter had just signed with the Soviet Union unless the Shah was allowed into the United States, reportedly prompting Carter more than once to hang up his phone in rage in the Oval Office and shout, "Fuck the Shah!" Jimmy was a Christian, y'all. You made Jimmy curse. Because many Republicans were attacking the SALT II treaty as a U.S. giveaway to the Soviet Union, Carter desired the endorsement of a Republican elder statesman like Kissinger to fend off this criticism, unquote. And so, on October 22nd, 1979, Carter grudgingly allowed the Shah to enter the United States for medical treatment. This instantly inflamed student groups in Iran, and they were all Khomeini loyalists looking for a reason to humiliate the United States. They breached the embassy gates in Tehran, pushed past the outnumbered Marine Guards who knew that opening fire would get everyone in the embassy killed, and took every American they could get their hands on hostage. Over 90 people, including the U.S. ambassador, were captured, paraded in front of the Iranian reporters and cheering crowds, and then locked away for 444 days. A few Americans escaped, some hid in the Canadian embassy. That's the whole plot of the movie Argo. And several more were released, but 55 would endure captivity and abuse for over a year while the United States lost their goddamn mind.
Yesterday in Houston, anti-Iranian demonstrators burned a flag in front of the Iranian consulate. The demonstrators tried to enter the building but were turned back by police. That demonstration symbolizes what appears to be growing anti-Iranian sentiment in this country, sentiment also being felt here in Tidewater. Today we went to Norfolk's financial district and asked people there what they thought.
I think it's appalling. I think that embassies are supposed to be neutral territory. I think they're respected by most nations in that way. And I think that the employees of the United States Embassy in Iran should be respected in that way. And I think that this country would be justified in rounding up and arresting American-Iranian students and detaining them in the same way.
As you might imagine, the story topped the nightly news every night, and even into late night. ABC created an entire new television show to grind the story into the American consciousness. 4 days after the embassy takeover, the Iran crisis, America held hostage, hit the airwaves after the local nightly news. Ted Koppel would gravely stare into the camera each weekday night and intone in his ominous voice,
Day 142 of the Iran hostage crisis.
And the show would become the now mainstay show Nightline. ABC loves to tout his public service in doing this, but really, they just needed something to run against Carson. As the weeks turned into months, the American public became increasingly frustrated with the Carter administration's apparent impotence to resolve the situation. From the National Archives, quote, President Carter committed himself to the safe return of the hostages while protecting U.S. interest and global influence. He pursued a policy of restraint that put a higher value on the lives of the hostages than on U.S. retaliatory power, unquote. Americans howled for military intervention.
Let's go bomb the Ayatollah, la 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 la. Blow Iran clear past Angola, la 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 la. Hang Khomeini from the rafters, la 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 la. No more kidnapping disasters, la 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 la.
Peace on earth and goodwill towards men, which would do absolutely nothing but get the hostages killed. But for the average American, that was less important than the feeling of powerlessness that came with some piss-out country daring to challenge the mighty United States. To be clear, there was precious little Carter could do other than negotiate. He froze Iranian assets, canceled arms shipments, got denunciations from our allies and the United Nations, but Iran was unmoved, and honestly, because Iran was a major oil producer, a lot of the countries quietly ignored U.S. sanctions and kept buying Iranian oil, including countries that counted the U.S. as one of their bestest buddy. They did it quietly. And to make matters worse for Carter, this was happening in an election year, 1980. An election where Carter was facing a bellicose warhawk opponent who missed no opportunity to impress on the voters that when he became president, this kind of shit would never happen. Even though it totally did, see episode 494 and 495 for more information.
That's a plug.
And I think long-term listeners to the show kind of already know who I'm talking about.
Reagan.
There was no real military option for Carter to pursue. Sure, the United States could launch airstrikes against Iran, but what would it accomplish? Was Carter supposed to bomb Tehran, blow up our own embassy just to say, you know what, fuck you, we don't even care about our people, we'll kill them our goddamn selves? Should we have invaded Iran, a nation of 40 million people, most of whom hated the United States, whose religion said that becoming a martyr was a good thing? Should we drop a nuke on an Iranian city? This was a wildly popular option for the American public. Again, none of the options would work. None of them would get the hostages out alive. Under pressure to do something, Carter approved the only possible military option he had on the table. From the Bill of Rights Institute, quote, Carter gave up trying to achieve a peaceful solution of the hostage crisis and endorsed a rescue effort prompted by National Security Advisor Zygmunt Brzezinski. I can't pronounce his first name ever. On April 24th, 1980, a team of 118 highly trained soldiers from Delta Force, an elite military unit, were to land in the desert south of Tehran, assault the embassy, and free the hostages. The mission, dubbed Eagle Claw, failed disastrously. 3 helicopters malfunctioned and their mission was scrubbed. And as the other helicopters took off from the desert base, one of them crashed, killing 8 of the soldiers. Delta Force evacuated and was forced to leave behind their dead teammates.
Well, that could have gone better.
So the situation dragged on and on. Carter was negotiating with the Iranians through Algerian intermediaries. The biggest demands of the Iranians was the Shah being turned over to them for trial, followed by a quick execution, the verdict of which was a foregone conclusion, and also,
guilty as charged.
And this is not a negotiable point for the United States for reasons, I guess. And the issue would finally be settled by the Shah himself, who escaped being executed by his countrymen for his many crimes against them by dying painfully of cancer in July of 1980. With this issue out of the way, the remaining issues were mostly about money. Iran wanted the Shah's stolen assets returned, Iran's money in international banks unfrozen, and sanctions lifted. Working through the Algerian administrators, they settled on giving back the money that rightfully and legally belonged to Iran to the tune of about $8 billion, and once the money was in the Algerian bank, Iran would send the hostages home. Just as soon as Ronald Reagan was sworn in as president. Yeah, and a final fuck you to Jimmy Carter, Iran dragged their feet until the very moment Reagan was sworn in. His hand hit the Bible and took the oath, and the hostages were turned over to the Americans.
That can't be a coincidence.
Oh, there's a whole theory of the case that it could be its own episode, but officially, there's no provable connection between Reagan's people and Iran. But, they totally did that shit. The Iran hostage crisis shook our national identity. It marked the final end of the Pax Americana. No longer could an American citizen walk without fear anywhere in the world, knowing that the power and might of the United States sheltered them from all harm. I mean, that was never actually the case, but storming the sacrosanct embassy demonstrated the old rules kind of no longer applied. It had also began our ongoing mutual animosity to the Islamic world, which would culminate in other shattered illusions of invulnerability on 9/11. Ironically or not, the first time the United States has used overt military power against Iran, despite decades of provocation, was when dipshit Trump bombed them just a few weeks before this episode aired. Which, honestly, now that I think about it, kind of fits the theme of this new series better than the actual events I'm talking about here today. Because I started this series with this incident, even though it doesn't really seem to fit the theme. After all, Jimmy Carter didn't invade Albania or something to distract Americans from what was happening in Iran. I started it here because after this, no American president was ever going to let himself get trapped in a situation like this again, even if they had to invade Albania. I mean, if that's the case, well, sorry, Albania, but I guess you had it coming. It was clear to everyone post-Carter, big wars cause big problems. But little wars are downright useful. Little wars distract, divide, and divert attention from other issues. They give the people something to rally around besides how badly the president is fucking up. Which is where we will pick up next week in part 2 of You Can Have a Little War as a Treat with the littlest war of them all. The epitome of the tail wagging the dog. And I think you're going to find it really special.
Rated T for Teen.
Each year, thousands of adults lose their shred. It's an epidemic simply known as shred loss. But it doesn't have to be this way. Because rekindling your shred is as easy as playing the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4. With new parks, cross-platform multiplayer, and sick new game modes, we can put an end to shred loss everywhere. Get the new Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 and show the world that the shred's not dead. Get Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 3 and 4 available now.
Using a Clorox disinfecting wipe to clean that stuck-on sauce from the stove feels like...
Oh, boy. That tickles. Stop.
It feels like coming home to your needy corgi after a long day.
Best part of the day, finally.
With Clorox. Clean feels carefree. Clean feels good. Use as directed.
That is it for the show this week. Episode 500, y'all. That's just a stupid amount of podcast, which is why this episode cannot be episode 500. It's just too preparatory. It's too, there's too much exposition going on here, and it doesn't really fit the summer series theme. And frankly, I'm not mean enough to Ronald Reagan in it, which is why next week will be episode 500. So if you want to help us reach 500, or you want to stop us from reaching 500, either way, I can be bribed not to do it. I've been avoiding 500 for months now. Hit us up at patreon.com/whatthehellpodcast. Use the website. Do not use the app. Every penny goes to finding me a new hobby or rehab, whichever seems like the better idea. Do all the things Jeremy tells you to do. Otherwise, he will have us in the studio all weekend for another pep talk, and frankly, none of us wants that. So for me, Dave, I'm sorry about all the coups. Bledsoe, producer.
I don't believe MI6 was remotely involved.
Gavin, and all the fictional Ayatollahs of rock and roll on the show. We're going to say the best you could do was a Beach Boys cover. Come on, guys, write a better parody song. And we'll see you all next week for part 2 of Summer Series 2025. You Can Have a Little War as a Treat.
Old Uncle Sam's getting pretty hot. Time to turn Iran into a parking lot.
What the Hell Were You Thinking stars Dave Bledsoe and features Gavin St. James and several fictional minions. The show is produced by Kimberly Steele and a part of the Seltzer Kings podcast network. You can find more information on the show on their website, whatthehellpodcast.com, or on Facebook as What the Hell Podcast. Thanks for listening.
I have no ending for this, so I take a small bow.
So, you served in Grenada?
Seltzer Kings
Podcasts.